Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Relationship Blueprint. Unlock your power of connection. And today, I really am excited to have someone with me. He's a good friend. His wife, Jessica, was a guest on the show a few weeks ago talking about her experience with menopause. And I had the opportunity to teach with Jessica last week and see Brian. So it's really fun to get to see you again.
You too.
The show, one of the things that we like to do here is explore the tools and insights and stories that help young people navigate life's biggest decisions. Today, we're joined by Brian Eames, an Atlanta-based certified Berkman consultant who is passionate about guiding teenagers through the often overwhelming process of discovering their strengths, passions, and career paths. With years of experience in the classroom and as a mentor, Brian has seen firsthand the struggles teens face when trying to figure out what's next. Through the power of the Berkman method, a leading personality and behavioral assessment, he helps young people gain self-awareness and understand their unique strengths and make informed choices about their future, whether it's choosing a college major, exploring career options, or gaining the confidence in their abilities. Brian's work is all about empowering the next generation to step into their potential. In this episode, we'll talk about how teenagers can better understand themselves, navigate career choices, and build a future that aligns with who they truly are. So if you're a student, a parent, or someone who just really cares about young adults, we hope you'll listen. Stay tuned for an inspiring conversation with Brian Eames. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction, Coco. I appreciate it.
Did I leave anything out that you really want our listeners to hear about?
Not really. I work some with Jessica. You mentioned we do workshops for couples regularly. That's a fun little side piece for me. But really, this Berkman piece has been something I've been chewing on for a number of years. And it was when my kids, who are now, one is kind of launched, one is in college, and one is soon to be heading in that direction. As they moved through that age, and all of our peers had kids that age, that I got very in tune with how these young people really need some guidance in figuring out what it is they're going to do with themselves as adults. That's a hard piece for them.
You know, I first was exposed to the Berkman through Bob. It was when I retired from the school system, and Kevin has a business, as you know, and I was going to start working there. And all of a sudden, while I was there, I had all these ideas about how it should be done. And so we were talking to Bob, and he said, you know what, you two might need the Berkman. So I'll let you tell how they line up when you do it with two people. But it was really fascinating because when we sat with Bob and I learned about myself, there were some things about my career path that I think I would have chosen a different path had I had this information as a young person. I believe that I stayed in a job too long. I was so blue that you could talk about that later, but I was so blue that working in a system was really suffocating for me. So, and then some other things that just came up that really helped me understand myself better. And it was affirming. I cried because I thought, wow, this assessment has captured so much about me that I knew, but maybe didn't trust. I personally have had the most amazing experience, and I'm grateful for the Berkman.
Well, me too. My first exposure to the Berkman it was about 20-ish years ago. I had left the world of education for a chunk of time, and in that period, I went and started working with my father-in-law, so my wife's father, and his business. So he had a wholesale business, and I wanted to kind of check that out. Whatever, investigate that world, right? And as we got involved, so here I am working directly with my father-in-law. We both got a lot of at stake to have that go well. Some months into the experience, it really was not going well. We were banging heads together, and we each were sure that the other one was approaching whatever the business issues, the wrong way, whatever. So it wasn't going well, and we ended up getting to an executive coach who gave us each a Berkman. And at the time I took it, I took it kind of, this isn't going to tell me anything. I'm an individual. What's it going to tell me about me? And I took it having a pretty low estimation of what it would say about me or what it would say about our relationship. I really just felt like this executive coach needed to point at him and tell him what he was doing wrong. So we got when I got the Berkman back, it was just stunning to me of how and kind of uncanny the things that it read into who I was and how I approached work situations. And there's a report you can run that lays the two of us, two profiles, our Berkman profiles, on top of each other and predicts, hey, here's where you're going to work together well. Here's where you're going to run into difficulty and what that's probably going to look like. And line item after line item is exactly where we were running into problems. And doing that process helped us to kind of have a language or a different lens of what we each were bringing to our work relationship that was both positive and negative, and having a different kind of respect for what the other was bringing. And so it was really helpful to us. So that was a long time ago, and it's resonated with me ever since then.
The other insight that we had as a couple, which I also really recommend this to couples, especially if you're in business, like your threshold of tolerance working with your father-in-law sounds a lot like Kevin and I being in the same building. But there was another part that when they lined us up together, that Kevin was in the 99th percentile for risk taking, and I was at the first.
Mm.
You can see how that looks in a marriage. So Kevin would say, let's open an office in Charleston. And I would be like, no, 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 we have to get the Savannah. I mean, but what he heard was criticism that I didn't have faith in him, all the imago stuff that, comes along with our stories. And what I felt was just frightened because risk taking never looked good in my childhood. It always was disastrous. So once we saw that, we really took away the sort of the stories that we had with it and just said, gosh, it's just who we are. It's just who we are. It made it very matter of fact, and it became less of an issue. And so I love all of the little nuances of the test or the assessment because it does amplify some of those things that just make it like, wow, so that's what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah, it really gives you, I mean, it's the report that you take to take it, it's about 140 something questions that are kind of all over the map in terms of how would you rate these in terms of preference, or do you think more people are this way or this way? And so as you're taking it, you can be a little puzzled as to how is this aiming at something? But from that, I mean, the Berkman has been around it's coming up on 75 years. So it's been around and has been reiterated, multiple, tons of times, really, and it's been taken by more than 2 million people. So it's gone through a really rigorous and long-standing process where, what it has to say is really valid and reliable. It'll stick. It's true. If I did mine 20 something years ago, I can read my Berkman right now and be like, yeah, that's so like I can see myself in that now. So it's pretty consistent, and it just helps me to kind of approach things a little differently when I'm up against or I'm working with someone who approaches things very differently. I think it has helped me to see their difference in a different way.
I love that part. It's helped you see their difference in a different way. I like that a lot because that comes back to that risk taking that I described. It felt like all the I'm right, you're wrong went away, right? So now I can see our differences and understand them, and they have less punch. Yeah. So tell us about the Berkman and students, because I'm really fascinated to hear, I was in education too, and you know that, Brian, but I didn't work with high schoolers. I did have 3 kids that went through high school, but that, like, I have to know what I'm going to be. I don't know where I want to go. My dad wants me to do this. All of the messages that kids are getting about school. So tell us of what you do. Tell me about how this works.
Well, the Berkman as an assessment is used in 2 primary ways. One is, I'd say the biggest way is within organizations. You get everybody in the organization or the C-suite or some group, some number of the folks who work together in an organization take a Berkman, and then they use that as a way to figure out how to work together better, more efficiently, and to work through conflicts and to kind of anticipate where conflicts might arise, so therefore be able to take care of do some work on the front end so as to avoid them. So basically to help organizations become more effective. It's got another component. It's used in another significant way, which is the part that I'm more focused on, which is So you get this report back from Berkman, and it's got kind of a bird's eye view. You tend to be like this, and it's this Berkman map thing, which gives you, kind of orients you towards these four colors. And then it zooms in at you very specifically according to nine components of human behavior and says what you usually look like and what your needs are in a situation, which is pretty remarkable about the Berkman. There are other assessments that are out there that will kind of tell you, oh, you tend to think and be interested like this, and these might be jobs that you'd like. But the Berkman piece shows you what you need from the environment around you, which is really important. And it also tells you with those components what you tend to look like when you're not getting your needs met. So it's got this bird's eye view, it's got the zoomed in view, and then this third piece is it looks at your whole profile and then compares you with people who are in lots of different fields, professions, and what their Berkmans look like, and people that are expressing a high degree of satisfaction in their work. So it can say, hey, you look a lot like a lot of happy pilots look, or you look a lot like people who are trial lawyers, or whatever. It's all over the place. So it will give you kind of a readout at the end of what careers your profile tends to look like. And that's the part where I'm using that information particularly. I think it's all very useful and helpful, but I think for young folks, getting a sense or some feedback for them of here's how you tend to approach things, which is useful for your own self-knowledge. And here are some areas of the world and professions where you'd probably look around and be like, hey, I'm among my people. And that might be a really good fit for you. So as I do this with young people, and say young people is anywhere from the last end part of high school. So I haven't yet done it with my youngest, who's a junior, but we will soon. So it's that stage up until, any place, into after graduation from college or during college, whatever, at some point when this young person is wondering what they're doing with their professional world and what makes sense for them, the Berkman will help to aim them in a direction that's probably more likely to be fulfilling and satisfying for them.
So I'm imagining, I mean, I know you and Jessica have, your oldest is 22?
Oldest is 25.
25, Jackson,
25 and 22, yes.
22 and 17.
17, yeah.
And so you're right in the thick of this, that so many parents that might be listening. And, if I remember correctly, I had a lot of things that I thought would be a good guide for my children at that age. And yet at that age, it's so much a time of individuating, and they really don't want to listen to their parents.
Mm.
Um, they obviously think they know better than we do. And so I'm imagining that parents who hire you to give this Berkman, it might be a little bit of a relief for them to feel like, okay, I'm giving this over in some ways, not always, but in some ways to really guide my child. Because it's hard for us to be objective about our kids too. We carry our fears about their careers. If they want to be a policeman, or in your case, go into the Navy.
The Army, my son.
Yeah. Tell us where Jack is right now.
Jack is my oldest, so he is currently deployed at the DMZ in South Korea right now. So he will be there until June, but he's an infantry officer. But we did the Berkman with him after he had graduated. He went to West Point, so it was after he had been through West Point, because he's nowhere close at this point, but at some point he's anticipating, well, what am I going to do when it makes sense for me to move out of the Army? What will life look like for me then? What are some areas that might be helpful for me? So the Berkman for him was a way of exploring that a little bit prior to having to actually do it. So we can mold that, investigate that.
Sounds like Jack's quite a planner.
He is. Yes, he is.
Because most kids are really fumbling around and wondering and lost, and then they're supposed to know, and there's so many issues there with comparing themselves to others. So it's wonderful that Jack was a planner and knew what he wanted, but I would say, and maybe you would say, he's in the minority.
I think he definitely is. I think it could be ultimately, I think of it as an expensive waste of time to go through some number of your years of your 20s, not really having a sense of, gee, where do I fit in the world? And maybe you get out and you start working in some direction, and yeah, this doesn't really work for me. And you've got this hook into this other career path. Okay, I'll just go down that direction without, so it can be kind of happenstance and random. And that's a pretty inefficient way to approach your life, your career, right? That's something that's going to last potentially for decades. And so I see the Berkman as a very small investment in terms of both time and money to be able to make a more sensible decisions about how to proceed. There are plenty of young people that go and they don't know what to do. They go through college and that's what they go to law school or whatever, just because if anything, it delays the decision. But if they took a Berkman, they might know whether anything in the legal world was, for example, would be a good decision for them.
Yes, Brian. And I'm also thinking about kids who they go through the 4 years just because that's what's expected of them. And the cost now of colleges and student loans. And now not only do they not like the job they have, and then they're also paying thousands of dollars in student debt. So there was one aspect of the Berkman that I can remember where it told me that I didn't like, I shouldn't work outside. It didn't say you shouldn't work outside, but was not leading me in that path. And while I love to be outdoors, it was so on point. Like, no, I don't want to work outside. I wouldn't be a good park ranger. I'd be running away from, I couldn't protect anyone because I'd be running from the animals. Certain things that are so helpful. And then maybe the kid who thinks he should go to college maybe finds out, there's this other path for me. And seeing it in black and white is just really affirming to, I would imagine, to anyone to say, wow, I could think about this differently. And as you said, then you don't spend time and years kind of going down a path that is pretty unconscious.
Yeah, I think particularly for young people, it's hard to know how you fit into this broader spectrum of humanity, really. Knowing that you've got a bent that looks a lot like happy fill in the blank, doctors, lawyers, whatever, teachers, writers, you name it, it's an affirming thing. Kind of helps you to pick up and say, okay, well, if that's something that I'm likely to be happy at, how about doing that? How do I go about getting there? And that's part of when I meet with these young folks, that's kind of what we do. We end up with this a way to investigate what those paths look like without necessarily having to commit towards one of them.
Do you have a story of a particular student that you want to share with us today? How the Berkman guided him or her?
Sure. Well, this one was pretty interesting because I ended up getting together with some parents. They wanted me to do this work with their oldest son, who was in college and kind of seemed like he knew where he was wanting to go, and he'd had a job, so he was in a good position in that regard, but wasn't really sure, and they weren't really sure if this was a good path for him. So we did that with him. I did that work with him, and it was good in the sense that it really did affirm that this direction that he seemed to be heading in was one that made sense and that played to certainly to his interests and how he operated in the world, with some nuanced differences. Like there's some pieces of it. This was in kind of the businessy marketing kind of piece, but he was not somebody who was not going to be the person who's out there selling and promoting. That's sort of one end of that world of business, and there's other ends that are more like doing some analysis, getting some data and feedback and figuring out systems and procedures, and that was more his aim. So I think, our conversations helped him to figure out where to be hooking in like that. But it went well for him. So then his parents wanted me to work with his younger brother who was about to go off to college. So we did that. And the brother, it was interesting because he had an idea of what he wanted to do. And what I said to him was, I'm not telling you to not go be a firefighter. Okay. What I am saying is you might want to be open as you kind of approach that world. And as you get deeper into this, just be open if there's some pieces of this that don't really resonate, and some other things you're seeing this other avenue that's starting to look attractive to you. Be open to that. You don't want to just be doubling down on some idea that you have of some profession, because sometimes the ideas that young people have of what a profession entails, it's informed by maybe who their parents were friends with or what they got from movies or television or something, but doesn't necessarily mean that they know much about what goes on in that profession.
That's been our experience with all three kids. One was really struggling, probably should have taken a gap year to really get clear, should have taken the Berkman, right? And then began her journey. Our son loved political science. He went to the USD Honors College. And then he worked on the Hill with Lindsey Graham for a couple of years and was so disillusioned by the politics. And but he did find his way to become an accountant, ironically. And so I guess he would not say he wasted those years because he really loves what he does and he may not have ever thought of that. But if he had the Berkman, could we have gotten there faster? And then our third wanted to be Erin Andrews, sports commentator, until she realized that you had to start at like 3 o'clock in the morning at a small little news station and work all night, that there wasn't another way to break in. And that was like, okay, I've got to pivot. And she's in advertising and killing it. So, everybody's landed well, but I think about what you're saying about this, the cost, which is how much, Brian?
The cost for the Berkman?
Yes.
It sort of varies depending on who you go to. If you come to me, it's $600. It's a session. Meet with me. I give you the Berkman. We walk through your Berkman. I give everybody a kind of a personalized written report about their Berkman so that they can interpret it. You've seen the report.
I have. It's
It's
amazing.
involved. There's a lot to it. So it's not, you can just hand it to somebody and walk away, but they're not going to get all of the nuance within it.
Very.
I not only do like an in-person sort of walkthrough with them, but I also give them a document that they can refer to later. And then also the great thing about the Berkman is that once you take the main assessment, there are a number of sort of subsidiary reports that can be run that somebody like me could run on you and get to you. And some of those are particular to the career exploration piece, and some are just other ways of looking at you according to how you approach tasks and people in tasks. So you kind of get all that, which is pretty.
Yeah. And the assessment takes about 45 minutes. Is that right?
Yes, I'd say on average it's about 45 minutes. It kind of
Yeah.
depends on how much you sit there and hover over your screen and wonder, wait, should I think about that? Should I tell these? I was like, don't think about it too much. Like just shoot from the hip, boom, and move on to the next question.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking about how much time and money we would have saved spending $1,800 on 3 kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your point is, I'm really taking that in and wishing that we had done that, because such a gift to your children.
Yeah, it really can be. I mean, it's not to say there aren't wonderful life lessons that you can get by landing in the wrong job, right? Right. We pick up things we learn about ourselves, but we're going to learn those lessons wherever we end up. And wouldn't it be nice to learn some of those lessons in a place where you might like ultimately to be for longer? Or some people I'm less like this because as a Berkman, if you knew the colors, like so there's one of the colors, I'm pretty classically red, which is like the doer. So I will jump and do something before I even look and see if it's even worth doing. But there's sort of the opposite end for me are the like thinkers who really dwell and wonder about things, and it takes them a long time to make those decisions. So if there's somebody who kind of tends towards that orientation, meaning they're probably more likely to stay in jobs that really won't really work, and probably are never going to work for them. And that's the part where it gets particularly expensive, not just for money, but just in your own sanity too, because it just wears you down.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, we spend more time at work than we do with our children. And so this lifetime of spending, let's just say 8 hours a day, if you're really not fulfilled, then I know that carries over into your home life. I mean, how do you go to work and do something that really drains your energy and then come home and give everything you want to give to your family? It's not reasonable. I'd like to know how people would reach you if they'd like to find out more about the Berkman.
My business partner and I, who's Bob Patterson, who know well, and has been doing Berkman work for a long time. But we are together. We make up Berkman Atlanta is our organization. So that we have a website, berkmanatlanta.com, and my email address to that is berkmanatlanta.com. So if anybody reaches out to me, I'd be happy to have a conversation.
That's really wonderful. Now, is there anything that you haven't shared about your work that you think is important for our parents to listen to and take in?
Just that I think my focus on the young person side of this, anybody can take a Berkman, right? So far, the oldest person I've done a Berkman with is deep into their 50s. And that was more because she was just curious as to why some jobs really didn't work out for her over her career. And she'd had a number of them. But I think my focus on the young people is that really I've spent my professional life working with young people and trying to help them figure out who they are and how they approach life. And that's my wheelhouse. So being able to take this aspect and help kids out in a new way. Kids, I'm old enough now. Kids is also well into your 20s as far as I'm concerned. So helping out these young people is really, it's what I love to do, and it brings me joy.
Yeah. And what is the name of the book you wrote?
My writing career. So I wrote two books for kind of older, sort of it's middle grade, so kind of 9 to 12 years old kids. So there's the Dagger Quick and there was the Dagger X, which were two books. You can still find them out there on Amazon. So that was an interesting foray into fascinating world of publishing.
And you told me the age group. What is the genre?
This was historical fiction. It was kind of pirate spin-off era. So it was 1600s is when the book takes place.
Kevin read them both and loved them. So he just can't speak higher of you. It's really fun to think about how many facets of Brian there are, the couples workshop presenter, the Berkman consultant, the writer, the teacher. And it sounds like that is very fulfilling for you.
Yeah, it is very much so.
Is there anything in your Berkman you haven't tried that looks like you might be really good at or enjoy?
Let's see the piece of my Berkman. And this is almost like a joke where sometimes when Jessica and I would be on road trips and we would go cruise by and see these truckers and they'd be pulling into the Love's truck stop or the Pilot truck stop, and I'd be like, something about that just looks great. And you can look back at my Berkman, and right there is like transportation, moving equipment. I was like, I'd have been a really happy truck driver, just kind of doing my thing, and like that sounds great. So if ever things don't work out for me, I'm just going to get my commercial license, and who knows where I'll end up.
We'll look for you at Buc-ee's.
Exactly.
It's funny as we're talking about this, I just had an aha moment. Tell us a little bit about Blue, and then I'll tell my story.
Sure. Blue tends to be folks who are kind of approach things a really thoughtful way about thought, innovation, creation, collaborating with others, but it's probably a kind of a smaller number of others. They don't tend to be like all the people all the time, that kind of thing. That's more the Blue characteristic.
So my career, like the strongest one, was television production, radio, and I'm thinking about my podcast and why I'm doing it. I have so much fun doing it. And so people ask me, what made you do that? I said, it's become like a favorite thing of mine. I really get my energy when I'm doing this. There are other things I do that drain my energy, like big groups. But I love, collaborating with a small group and really throwing around ideas, as you've said. So it's the idea of how much we can glean from just one assessment that takes 45 minutes and costs $600. And that's just amazing. Well, Brian, I've so enjoyed our time together, and I'm really hoping that our listeners will take advantage of really what you have to offer, because I just know as a parent, when I was struggling with all this, I didn't know about the Berkman, and I certainly would give anything to have had that opportunity for my children. And I can't recommend you more as a human being. And if you could meet his children, you would really say, wow, he's in the right hands. She's in the right hands. So thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's so fun. So thank you everybody for being with the Relationship Blueprint today. Unlock your power of connection. And I want to remind you that this assessment can really help your child unlock their power. And unlocking power and potential is what we really want for our kids, because once we're gone, we want them to just fly. And so look at Brian's website and investigate this. And we will see you next time on the Relationship Blueprint. If you like what you've heard today, share it with friends, like it on Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. If you really like the video version of this, you can look at us on YouTube. And then share this episode with your kids. See what they think. See if they'd like to take this assessment, and just see, because all kids like to know. Take a test and find out more about you. I think you're going to get a resounding yes. So thanks again, everybody, and we'll see you next week.